Hear our text this morning from Psalm 107, verses 10 through 16. Some sat in darkness, in utter darkness, prisoners suffering in iron chains, because they rebelled against God's commands and despised the plans of the Most High. So he subjected them to bitter labor. They stumbled, and there was no one to help. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He brought them out of darkness, the utter darkness, and broke away their chains. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. For he breaks down gates of bronze and cuts through bars of iron.
This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You guys awake today? All right, look at the person next to you and say, are you awake today? Wake them up. Give them a nudge. A little tired today. Do we need to do another lap? Do we need to do another 3-minute lap? All the introverts in the room say, please, no. Just yesterday, Carolee and I were driving back from Branson, and we were listening to this new album of this artist that we like to listen to, and just released a new album, so we were listening to the lyrics, and there were some lyrics in these songs that were just so heavy, just like hit you right in the gut. And as we were kind of listening to them for the first time, I was kind of almost giggling, but not giggling because it was funny, but just giggling because they were so profound and so like heartfelt. And Carolee's like, why are you laughing? I was like, oh, that's just so good. That lyric is so good. That's the thing about songs. They can just hit you in the heart. Music can just take you places that words alone can't. Even poetry. Poetry set to music is better, if you ask me. So powerful. So it's been really fun for me to talk to you after the service. The last 4 weeks, we've been talking about hymns in our hymnal. It's been fun for me to talk to you after the service, just to see how meaningful these songs are to you. And that's what makes music cool, is it lodges itself in different memories that we have, and different times of life, and different moments that really matter. And it becomes like the soundtrack to our faith, if you will. And so it's really cool to kind of dive in and look at that and look at the theology of our songs. It wasn't that long ago, if you would have came to church here, maybe 40 years ago, I don't know, you would have came and there wouldn't have been screens on the wall. There wasn't even overhead projectors yet. So you guys remember the overhead projectors? Or you could see the guy's hand on the thing and up and down. And it used to be you'd walk in, there would be a hymnal somewhere in the pew in front of you or underneath, and that's what we had. And those hymnals were really important because it was the collection of the music that the church sang. So you had these editing committees that would choose what are the songs that are going to make the hymnal, and you'd open that up, and that would contain really all of the songs we would sing, unless there was a special song that somebody might perform. All of the congregational music came out of that hymnal. Now we have projectors and we have mass production of Christian music. It's a huge industry. The worship music industry is huge. And we have the internet. We can pull any song we want. And the cycle of songs is much quicker now, for better or for worse. But in this series, we're looking at some of the songs that we've been singing for literally hundreds of years and seeing how they might have shaped who we are as Christ followers. And so today is actually really fun because the hymn that we just sang and that we're going to talk about today is written by a Nazarene. Did you know that? Glorious Freedom is a song of us. It was written by this guy. His name is Halder Lilienus. Some of you may even know him or some of his family in this room. And it was written in 1917. And he was a Nazarene elder. He was an ordained elder, a minister in the church, who had a passion for music and started his own publishing company. So the picture on the right is one of our hymnals from the Nazarene Church called Sing to the Lord. And you can't probably read it, but down below that it says Lilienus Publishing Company. And that's this guy's publishing company that he started. And then the Nazarene church eventually it became the Nazarene publishing company for music. And so the hymn we're looking at today comes from the Nazarene church. Isn't that cool? It's like, man, we write our own music. That's kind of fun. One of my favorite things about this hymn that we just sang is probably one of the things you think might be kind of weird. It's the fascinating name that the writer gives to Jesus in the chorus. He calls him the glorious emancipator. Isn't that fun to say? Everybody say that with me. The glorious emancipator. I love that word. It just kind of rolls off the tongue. But it's not a word we use very often. Has anybody used this word in their normal conversation the last year or two? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. I didn't think so. But you probably recognize this from a famous moment in our nation's history, right? The Emancipation Proclamation, right? Which is this document that President Abraham Lincoln drafted in the middle of the Civil War. And his intent in drafting this was to actually give freedom to the slaves from the rebel states. And in doing so, that would kind of strengthen the core of his fighting men. But when he drafted this document, there was some unintended consequences, and the whole shape of the Civil War actually shifted, and there was kind of a new purpose. And now that war really became about freedom at its core. And so when we think about Abraham Lincoln, one of his nicknames is actually the Great Emancipator. That's Abe Lincoln. And then you have the Glorious Emancipator. So what in the world is an emancipator? We should ask, right? Emancipator simply means one who sets a person or group free from bondage. So today, we want to see Jesus through this lens. How does Jesus actually set us free from the things that we're chained to? Just like Abraham Lincoln was kind of this model or this forerunner for freedom, how is Jesus even one step greater, the glorious emancipator? I hate to admit it, but I was recently emancipated. That should concern you, but nobody said anything, so maybe, yeah. Carolee was out of town, so I had drop-off duty for all three boys, which is an absolute zoo. And I had taken Knox to school. He's the first one, and he neglected to tell me that he needed a sack lunch that day because they were going to be eating outside. And so then I took Brigham to school, and after I took Brigham to school, I just happened to read the email that says Knox needs a sack lunch. So I quickly made a sack lunch, and as fast as I could, and I still had Beckett to take to school, and so I said, Beckett, hurry up, get in the car, we got to leave early because I have to take Knox his lunch before I drop you off at school. And so we jump into the car, and we buzz around the neighborhood, and we come down this stretch. The elementary schools we're driving around, they're all already in session. There's not a lot of traffic. And so I am apparently going 39 miles per hour in a school zone. And I'm pretty good at seeing cops, and I did see him, and I stopped right away. But he was facing the other way, and he must have shot radar out his back window or something. And so sure enough, I'm in a hurry. I'm 14 over in a school zone. This guy pulls me over, and he walks up to the car, and he says, "You in a hurry?" I said, "Yeah, I am in a hurry." I said, I apologize, and I'm trying to get my son his lunch, and I'm trying to get this guy off to school. And I think Beckett was my saving grace because he knew if he sat there too long and wrote me a ticket that Beckett was probably going to be late to school because I didn't have much time to drop off the lunch and go to school. And so he grabbed my license and my insurance, and he went back to the car. And just about 30 seconds later, he popped out of his car, and he said, "Well, I looked you up. You got a clean record. You don't do a lot of speeding." He said, "This time I'm going to let you go." And then he said, "Did you know that if I were to give you a ticket, because it's in a school zone, you have to go to court? It's an automatic court date. You can't just pay it. You can't send your lawyer. You got to go to court." And he said, "These tickets start at $400 and go up from there." And so I was so thankful. I said, thank you so much. I will go 35 from here on out. 10 over is plenty. I'll just keep it at that, right? But what I wanted to shout in that moment was, glorious freedom! Woo! Not really, though. That's fantastic freedom. I'll take that any day of the week, right? But glorious freedom is a whole nother realm. Glorious freedom is freedom from that haunting guilt and shame, from that bad decision that you made as a young person. Glorious freedom is freedom from anxiety and fear that cripples you and holds you down. Fear of the future, fear of what's not yet, fear of what may never be fulfilled. Glorious freedom is freedom from the desire from all the things you shouldn't want, but you do, and freedom from the arrogance that shows itself just as much in pride as it shows itself in insecurity. Glorious freedom, you can't win for yourself. You can't learn how to do it from a TED Talk. Your counselor can't lead you into it. You can't develop it from a good teacher, and no man can ever afford to pay it for you. Not even that generous police officer. Glorious freedom requires a glorious emancipator. And I want to tell you about him today. So let's look at Psalm 107, which Chris read for us earlier. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. We're starting in the 10th verse. Pull out your phone. You can see the context. The context is really cool in Psalm 107. There's actually 3 sections that are similar. We're just going to talk about one of them, but that's a really cool reason to bring your Bible to church, because then you can kind of see how it fits in the grand scheme of things. Listen to how perfectly this particular passage describes humanity and describes our relationship with the Lord. I think it just nails us. It's a really cool passage. Psalm 107, starting in verse 10, says this: Some sat in darkness, in utter darkness, prisoners suffering in iron chains. So this is before prison reform, right? You didn't get 3 square meals. You didn't have all of the comforts that prisons now have. You sat in a dark dungeon, and if you didn't have friends who would care for you, then you would rot away in that dark dungeon. There's nothing humane about it. So they sat there because, everybody say because they rebelled against God's commands and despised the plans of the Most High. So he subjected them to bitter labor. They stumbled, and there was no one to help. And here's the haunting truth as we just pause for a second. The freedom we so desire is actually a freedom that we gave up. It's a freedom we surrendered. We gave it up because we bought the original lie of Satan. The original lie of Satan. If you'll remember, maybe you don't know the story, but in the Garden of Eden, God's created Adam and Eve, and he's told them that you can go in this garden and explore and have everything you want. There are no limits at all in this beautiful garden, the most beautiful garden you've ever seen, full of the most lush fruit and plants and food and shelter. But God said there's one tree that you must not eat from. And that was the one restriction. And so as Adam and Eve approached that tree, the enemy snuck in and said, did God really tell you that you can't eat from that tree? Is God really trying to limit you? Is God really a God that would take away your freedom? You can't have this one tree. You see, Satan robbed us of true freedom by actually offering us a counterfeit freedom. Did you catch that? And he still does this all the time. He says, if you really want to be free, then there are no restrictions that can exist. And so if you want freedom, that means complete liberty. No one's going to tell you what to do, not even God. And Satan sells us this false freedom, and we give up our true freedom because we buy the lie. He still does it all the time. Should God really have a say about who you date or how you budget or where you work? Now, I'm a believer, but God can mind his own business on some of that stuff. When God says no, is it merely because we believe that somehow he doesn't want us to experience the blessings or the happiness or the joy? So God is saying no in some way to limit our experience of joy and happiness. Man, I'm guilty of believing that sometimes. When God says, trust me, are we really supposed to take him at his word? Not at his word plus some evidence, not at his word plus what some smart people think, not at his word and our experience and how our experience has maybe reinterpreted his word. You see, the enemy plants the exact same apple seed he did in the garden. To surrender to God is to give up your freedom. So we walk around as if walking with Jesus is this restriction we have. If we could only get out from under the burden of having a king. But I love how this passage kind of clarifies the nature of sin. If you look in here, you can see what sin really looks like. And sin is not just some act we commit. It's not messing up and making a mistake. Sin is actually a rebellion against God. It's when the mighty and the glorious, the one on high, gives us direction and we say, no, thank you. And we push away and we claim our own independence. You see, sin is a relational entity. Refusing to let God author your freedom is to engage in sin. So we choose fake freedom, right? Where no one's restricting us. But Martin Lloyd-Jones, who's a famous preacher in England, said that every time we sin, we weaken our existence. In other words, we were created for so much more, and each time we try to claim some sort of independence from God's way in our life, we actually weaken the very nature of who we are. We step into something fake. It's an act of choosing bondage. To step away from God is an act of choosing less than. It's an act of choosing powerlessness. We are actually giving our power away. It's not just a weak moment. What it is deliberately putting our hands behind our back in a place of surrender and control. Because sin isn't just an act, it's a sentence. Look at John's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 34. Jesus says, very, very truly, I tell you, that everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Wow. I guess our song perfectly describes it in its opening line. Once I was bound by sin's galling fetters, which that word galling we don't use a lot either. It just means painful. It means irritated. It means cutting into us, making us bleed, discomfort. And fetters are simply just chains, another word for chains, things that bind us. So once I was bound by sin's painful and raw and rubbing chains, chained like a slave, I struggled in vain. Wow. Then it so articulately describes some of our chains. The song goes on to say, I'm chained by carnal affections. You want a pure heart and a pure mind, but you're drawn and attracted to all the raunchy and the obscene and the perverted. And lust has made its way into a permanent place in your heart. It has this grip on you. You chose and you choose a moment of indulgence. Those are carnal affections. Then the song talks about envy. Your heart seems to be so discontent. You can't settle down. You just want the things that you don't already have, right? You spend more time dreaming about what's possible than appreciating what is already in your hands, and carnal affections and envy bind together. What about hatred? Hatred of those that hurt you, hatred of those that vote different than you, that think different than you, that express themselves and look different. Or how about this, the vilest of all hatred, hatred of self. You can't stand who you are. You can't handle your past. And then there's strife. You're always stuck arguing with somebody. Maybe it's your in-laws one day. Maybe it's your coworker. Maybe it's that annoying friend on Facebook who has no filter and just won't be quiet. Maybe you sit there and argue with the TV, the news anchor. But you're always in a battle. You're always in conflict. You're always kind of abrasive and easily provoked. Then there's vanity. Some of us, our mirrors are worn out. They're so overused. Your phone camera is stuck in selfie mode. Your image is so exaggerated that you can barely carry it around. It's this burden that just weighs you down. You concern yourself way more with what's on the outside than you ever do with what's on the inside. That's the sin of vanity. Then there's worldly ambitions. Not just success, right? Not just influence, but you want comfort. You want recognition. You want to be noticed. You want to be loved. And most of all, you want to win. And your ambition is a chain that binds you. Then there's pride. Oh, you might not think I'm a proud person, but you're unafraid to tell everyone that your job is beneath you. No one ever appreciates what you truly bring to the table. You just never get the opportunities that you really deserve. And your words, if you were to measure them, if you were to listen to just what you say day in and day out, there's way more complaints than there are compliments. That looks like pride to me. And then there's sinful follies. You can't even seem to escape your own poor choices. Does it ever feel like, man, my poor choices have been chasing me over and over again? You often say too much or act too soon. You often struggle with self-control. You find yourself wishing your foot was in your mouth. And then some of us, it's a love of glitter and gold. Your heart wants more. It doesn't really care what. It just wants more. More money, more things, more status, which means your schedule is more crowded. Your list of debts is really long. And your contentment is really short. And then there's just pure evil. You don't have time to sow good seeds. You don't have the energy to serve anyone other than yourself. The less fortunate will remain the less fortunate. Your impulses are greater than your compassion, and where that leads us is evil. Then there's a temper. Stepping on some toes here. You're short with your spouse. You're mean to your kids. You're in a battle and a quarrel with your neighbor, and you haven't spoken to that one family member since they wronged you that one time. Your temper has got the best of you, and your anger, your teeth grind at night. Your brow is almost stuck furrowed. Bitterness is your daily companion. Grudges are many and well-seasoned. So little in life brings you any pleasure. And lastly, fear. What will become of my children? How will I recover all that was taken from me, all that I've lost? I can never try that. If I try that, I'll most certainly fail. Fear means that I let my anxiety set the limits on who I will be and what I will accomplish. Oh, but I have my freedom, right? No one's telling me what to do. I get to choose what's good for me. I get to choose what's best. I get to choose what makes sense in my mind. I don't have a preacher or a friend or a God giving me orders. Yet, our liberty has led us to dark places. Our fake freedom has left us in chains and helplessness. And if you're honest, some of you today, this is how you feel. I don't know that glorious freedom. Does the counterfeit freedom look familiar? Scripture declares that while we are bound and in chains of our own choosing, while we are stuck in our rebellion against God, Jesus comes to us and finds us. Before we ever have the opportunity to break our own chains, Jesus sits in our darkness with us. He meets us exactly where we are. And he stands at the door, it says in Revelation, and he knocks. And in his knocking hand, he has the keys to your freedom to unlock the life that you were created to live. And he listens for one that will come to the door and open the door and allow Jesus to come in. He says, are you ready to be free? In fact, in Luke's Gospel, chapter 4, Jesus calls himself the glorious emancipator. And he doesn't use those words, but they've been reading about a Messiah that will set people free for hundreds of years, and Jesus comes to the earth and he quotes the prophet Isaiah. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, the blind will see, and that the oppressed will be set free. And guess what? That time of the Lord's favor has come. After Jesus said that, he rolled up the scroll, he handed it back to the attendant, he sat down, and all the eyes of the synagogue looked at him intently, and then he began to speak to them, and he said, the scripture you've just heard has been fulfilled this very day. In other words, you don't have to wait for your freedom. You don't have to wait for what's next. See, none of us are truly qualified to be true emancipators. There's not a person in this room that can set you free. None of us hold the keys to true freedom. Only one can. And can you admit today that you need an emancipator? Could you confess that you need real freedom? Look at our psalm today. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. That's good news. He brought them out of the darkness, the utter darkness, and he broke away their chains. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. For he breaks down gates of bronze and he cuts through bars of iron. Just look at the language. He saved them. He bought them and brought them from darkness. He broke away their chains. He breaks down, he shatters gates that are holding them in jail cells. And Paul says this of Jesus in Galatians chapter 5. He says, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. So stand firm then. Do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. It's a choice now, church. It's a choice now. Christ has not only covered your penalty for sin, but Christ has given you the power to break free from sin in your life. He's made a way out. He's offered freedom from the chains, a chance to return to glorious freedom. The question is, will you take the offer? Do you need an emancipator today? Will you allow him to break the chains. Carolee is going to come and sing a song. Would you just close your eyes and pray this really simple prayer as she comes to sing for us? God, in what area of my life do you want to set me free? God, what area of my life do you want to bring freedom? God, what chains are binding my hands and my feet? What chains are restricting my life of service to you? God, what chains are keeping me from the freedom I desire? As she sings a song, would you ask the Lord to be your emancipator?